Hello, and today we will be
This is George.
watching Republic Stud's um news video where he remade American presidents in Lego form. And I am here to explain all the inaccuracies of this video, and I am going to keep a tally of it. Let's get into this.
This is George Washington, and this is every US president. And in this video, I'm going to recreate every United States presidency going all the way back to the 1700s up to today. So with all that said, Lego. This is the first president, George Washington. He was born in Virginia and was elected the first president by basically everyone.
Not basically by everyone, because there was other candidates. Wow, a shocker that there was other candidates in a presidential election. Continue.
That's because he was the leader of the Continental Army, which fought to free the United States from Great Britain. And what's even weirder is he didn't really want the job as general or president.
He volunteered to be in the war, and he really didn't want to be president, but he just went along with it. So I'm gonna give him another tally mark.
Everyone just kind of forced him to do it because he was so epic.
I wouldn't call George Washington epic. He was fighting in the Revolutionary War. Yeah, he kept slaves, a bunch of slave owners, and he wanted to free them, but he knew that it would be wrong to the people, even though it would have literally ended the Civil War, which would have happened 70 years later, and it wouldn't have started the Civil War in the first place.
He led his men into battle in his Dodge Challenger. Not really, although that would be epic.
Do I really need to explain this?
And even threatened to shoot cowards who tried to escape the battlefield
Finally, he actually did something true.
when fighting the British.
We're done when I say we're done.
He was married to Martha, who helped at war camps, and he
Yes, that's actually true.
never actually got to sign the Declaration of Independence because he was too busy fighting the war. Like when he got some of his boys onto boats and crossed the Delaware River.
He did cross the Delaware River, but about the Constitution thing, he did not sign it because he really wasn't a founding father, and he was actually right about that war. So I am not giving him a tick for that, despite me pausing the video.
Which I built. George Washington became a big hero and was democratically elected because most people voted for him. He set presidential precedents, which are basically rules that all their presidents had to follow, like only staying in office for 2 terms.
He made that at the end of his career, just because he served 8 years and didn't want to rerun. I'm not giving him a tally mark. I'm just mostly going to be pausing for some fun facts.
So that America wouldn't become a monarchy or creating a cabinet. Not that kind of cabinet. This one had different jobs, which he gave to people like Thomas Jefferson and Henry Knox. And his vice president was John Adams, who said his job was the most insignificant invention ever created by man.
Yes, because there's not much stuff for a vice president to do.
I don't think John liked his job very much. Which works out because he became the second president of the United States. But now I have to build the Oval Office, where the president makes their most important decisions. So let's build.
This is where I remember that I am watching a Lego builder. So we're just gonna skip this part.
I'm selling it on my Rebrickable page, so you could get.
Also, John Adams moved into the White House. Well, he was the first to move into the White House. Well, for about a year and a half, or about 2 years, because it was built during his career and during George Washington's reign.
The instructions and make your very own. Yo, this place is looking pretty presidential, which is why I sat down Adams to get him ready for his presidential duties, like signing treaties with the French.
True. Actually, he got another thing right for once. Because he did sign an agreement with the French, because let's just keep going. I know that he signed the French, but I forgot where, because I'm filming this with my live reaction.
Being a master negotiator, approving or denying laws, and being commander of America in wartime. Now, Adams thought you could bend the Constitution a little bit, and Thomas Jefferson didn't like that very much.
I really don't think that John Adams bent the Constitution. There's probably a bunch of statements that will back up his claim, but I really don't know how he would have bent the Constitution. He bent one rule, and Thomas Jefferson really would probably not really care, as he was the vice president with barely any power.
And so began the first beef of 1800. They fought and debated a lot.
Well, the beef of 1800 was not a real thing. Shocker, right? They were beefing for a while, but then at the end of Jefferson's life, they became friends for a while.
And eventually Jefferson kicked him out of the Oval Office as the third president. Now Jefferson was a pretty awesome guy. He owned and read over 10,000 books, collected dinosaur bones, and eventually had one named after him.
It's the Jeffersaurus.
It's not called the Jeffersaurus, it's called the Chesapeake Jeffersonus. I really don't even know if this is real or not, because I am not an archaeologist nerd, I'm just a history buff.
And while writing the Declaration of Independence, felt uncomfortable, so invented the swivel chair so he could sit and spin.
He didn't do that so he can sit and spin, and he also wasn't the sole writer of the Declaration of Independence. That's 2. Now we're at 8.
Bought the Louisiana Purchase, which is this big spot of land from the French, and he sent his boys Lewis and Clark to go discover new animals, but especially dinosaurs.
There was no dinosaurs, and Lewis and Clark weren't the only ones to go out there. He patrolled a whole bunch of different men. Most of them died on the way, but Lewis and Clark are the only famous ones.
They didn't find any dinosaurs. And also during this time, Jefferson's friend
Obviously, no dinosaurs lived in the US.
Hamilton was shot in a duel, and after he served his term, he retired. He and John Adams became friends again 50 years after they signed the Declaration of Independence, and when John Adams died, his last words were Thomas Jefferson survives. But he died a couple hours before, both on the 4th of July.
True. It's actually true.
The 4th president was James Madison, and he was really short. When he was president,
he was 5'4", which is pretty short by women's standards nowadays. And sadly, I know this as being almost the same height as James Madison.
The Empire struck back. The British came to the US and even lit the White House on fire.
Well, the British didn't really come to the US. It was mostly British troops that were stationed in Canada. I'm not going to count this as a tick, just because it's basically the same thing. And they did burn the White House while the US tried to invade Canada and absolutely got destroyed. Yet we still believe that we won it,
causing it to go up in flames. But the US fought back and won, sending the British away forever.
We didn't win. I don't recall that. I don't think that having the British burn down the White House and us trying to move into Canada, making it in, and then getting destroyed in Canada is the same as winning.
James Monroe was the 5th president and the last one to be a founding father.
True. That's honestly correct.
He created a rule basically telling the British and all their friends to leave us alone. He also died on the 4th of July.
He did, but what he neglects is that it was a few years after.
Was that guy who was next to Adams when he died, his son John Quincy Adams. Except now he's bald and the president. One time when he was
he is bald.
Teaching his sons how to shoot, he tried.
I'm just going to spare you these boring details. He tried putting gunpowder into an already loaded gun and set it off.
Loading an already loaded gun and almost shot himself in the face. He was also the only president to become a congressperson after being president. The 7th president was.
And what he neglects to add is that he was okay. He was pretty okay when it came to being a congressman, despite having a heart attack on the floor.
Andrew Jackson. He was a huge fanboy of Thomas Jefferson and wanted to be just like him.
I'm just speechless. He was not.
He also had a massive dueling problem and dueled over 100 people in his life.
Yes, but oh my gosh, this guy. Okay, so Andrew Jackson's my least favorite president, mostly because he killed a bunch of Native Americans. by sending them on the trails of tears. Yet this guy neglects to add anything about our worst president. Sorry for getting a little political for this video, but still, Andrew Jackson was a horrible person. He did have basically a dueling problem, killed a bunch of guys.
For reference, this is 100 people. Bro, 8th is Martin Van Buren, and when he was president, Texas was a country, and they wanted to join the states. And when they asked to join, he hit him with the big ol'. The 9th president was William Henry Harrison.
I don't think he said that. I really don't think he said a meme.
And he died 31 days after becoming president.
True. That's true. He died from either pneumonia or I think it was leukemia. I don't know. I'm a history buff, not a medical major.
10th is John Tyler, who wasn't elected because his boss, you know. And he also made Florida a part of America.
Mickey Mouse was not a part of this. He had nothing to do with this. Also, I don't think you can get a palm tree into the White House. Also, Florida was occupied by Spain, and that's a quick fun fact.
Florida man and American. Oh yeah. All right. 11th was James K. Polk, and he died 3 months into his term. And 12th was Zachary.
Wait, did James K. Polk die 3 days, month into his term? Wait, no, he didn't. He lived through his entire term and died 3 months after leaving office. He served a full term.
Taylor, and he ate some bad cherries and died 1 year in. Bro.
People say he ate bad cherries. The cause of his death is still unknown, and he was excavated back in 1991 because no one knows how he died. People say he got poisoned. We're still unsure to this day, just like William Henry Harrison.
What's happening? Wait, why is everyone dying? Millard Fillmore was the 13th president, or as I like to call him, the Rizzler-in-Chief. One time he visited the Queen of England, and she thought he was the most handsome man she'd ever seen.
True. Except this was Queen Victoria. Probably sorry for you, all the British viewers, ugliest queen I've ever seen.
Franklin Pierce was 14th, and you don't want to know what this man went through.
I don't think he's gonna say it, but his son died in a train crash. He got crushed by a train car, while him and his wife only were left with slightly injured, while his son got crushed by a train car right in front of their eyes, which was really tragic.
The 15th is James Buchanan. He's argued,
and that's all they write, even though that he was also one of the people that basically started World War, well, not World War, basically the one that led up to the cause of the Civil War, and basically screwed up. Also, I'm pretty sure he was the one that brought Texas in as a state.
arguably the worst president. And 16th is Abraham Lincoln.
I like how he doesn't even mention James Buchanan's name. And that because Buchanan was definitely one of our worst presidents, but a quick fun fact. Most sites show that he was a closeted gay. Possibly our first LGBT president.
The one on the penny, and has a whole monument dedicated to him. When he was young, he used to get in fist fights a lot, and it was even in a...
Yes, he was a fist fighter. He fought a lot of people, and it's true.
gang. He was also super tall and fought the great evil of slavery. He commanded the Union Army in the Civil War and wrote the Emancipation...
He wasn't the commander of it. He was the U.S. president, and the U.S. president is much different than a commander, because that was Ulysses S. Grant, who will be later on this list.
proclamation to free the slaves. A couple of days after the war, Lincoln attended Ford's Theater, and a man named John Wilkes Booth came and shot him in the back of the head. Lincoln was arguably one of the best presidents.
That's pretty true. He's regarded as one of our best presidents
To ever live. But before we go any further, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, Acting
Nope.
President. Hide in the built-in 32-hour battery, great for me. And I'll make soon off as the next president. The same became the 17th president, and John Wilkes Booth actually hired his friend to take Johnson out the same day as Lincoln, but the friend chickened out. Next was Ulysses S. Grant, who
I'm gonna give an extra tally mark because of sponsorships. And Andrew Johnson was pretty boring president and a pretty bad president. And thank God he didn't say anything about him.
was a big war hero, and he was also invited to the theater, but he couldn't make it, which turned out to be lucky.
He didn't because his wife despised Mary Todd Lincoln. Also, people say he was a really bad alcoholic when all he drank was he was barely an alcoholic. Besides drinking, despite the occasional whiskey drinking with his bros.
And he's on the $50 bill. And 19th is Rutherford B. Hayes, and he might have had the most epic presidential beard.
Honestly, you got a good point.
20th is President Garfield, and he was shot in a train station when he was with Abe Lincoln's son. He died a little bit later right here in New Jersey because the doctors spent too much time trying to take the bullet out of him.
Yep, and then he shoved his dirty, gross hand into President Garfield, which basically killed him. Also, he was buried in New Jersey, but he was shot in, I'm pretty sure, Baltimore Station, but he died in Jersey. That's not all he's known for. He's known for a lot of other things.
Even bringing in the first ever metal detector to try and find it. Chester A. Arthur was 21st, and he liked clothes and owned over 80 pairs of pants.
I can neither confirm or deny this, because I don't think this would be very hard to calculate if this ever happened. I'm just going to put a check here just because I'm not 100% sure.
Grover Cleveland was the 22nd president and only president to win, lose, and win again. And also the only person I've ever heard of named Grover. 23rd was Benjamin Harrison, and he's the
First person I've ever heard of named Grover. There's a lot of famous Grovers, like Grover Cleveland and the puppet.
last president to this day to have a beard. Oops, Cleveland's back. William McKinley was elected the 25th president.
Wow, I like that Benjamin Harrison's still last one to have a beard. It's all he's known for. It's not like he hired the first female secretary. Wow, and he doesn't even mention that.
And when he was at the World's Fair in 1901, where many of Nikola Tesla's inventions were being shown off, a man came up to shake his hand and then shot him. The Secret Service, which is the president's special protection unit, started beating up on him so badly that President McKinley told them to take it easy on him. He died shortly after, making his vice president Teddy Roosevelt.
Yes, that is basically true. That did happen to McKinley. So like, yeah, that basically happened to him.
Roosevelt, the 26th president. And this man was a legend. Or what he called
He was pretty cool, and he even got shot, and still gave a speech after an hour speech after being shot.
himself a bull moose. He spoke softly and carried a big stick, created the FBI, won a Nobel Prize, and liked to box. Lost vision in one eye in a match and took on jiu-jitsu instead. And when he was giving a speech, he got shot in the chest and lived. Brought the shooter up on stage, asked him why he did it, and then kept giving the speech with the bullet inside of him.
I'm pretty sure he didn't do that other thing because, from what I remember, I'm pretty sure. I don't know why Cleveland would bring him back up on stage, because that would be the most stupid move ever done by a president. Besides Lincoln, not even hearing John Wilkes Booth's footsteps.
Later, the Secret Service found a note from the shooter that said the reason he wanted to shoot Roosevelt is because the zombie of William McKinley told him.
It wasn't the zombie. It was the ghost of William McKinley.
Teddy was also a big outdoorsman and refused to shoot a bear, and because of this, teddy bears exist. Next was William Howard
Yes, that's true.
Taft, and he was a big fella, really big. So big, he supposedly got stuck in the White House bathtub
Didn't happen at all.
so many times that they had to order him a new one. Teddy also
Nope, that's a myth because obviously that's a myth.
came back and tried to run against him and Woodrow Wilson, and Wilson won. While he was president, Prohibition was created, which banned the sale of alcohol, and also World War I broke out, and he was commander-in-chief of the whole army.
Yes.
He was a big fan of big government that had more power than it was supposed to in the Constitution, which led to Warren Harding becoming president, because he promised things would go back to normal.
Oh, Woodrow Wilson. Oh, I'm sorry, I have a slight cough. It's probably because Warren G. Harding did nothing of that. He tried, failed, and died. And Woodrow Wilson, honestly, I'm not even giving him a check. He basically did all that stuff. He was commander-in-chief during World War One, and he did all that.
But he died a few years in creating my favorite president, Calvin Coolidge. Calvin Coolidge was sworn in as the 30th president by his dad. He was a very honest and quiet person, and while he was president, Americans got access to new tech like Model T cars, radio, and electricity.
Yes, that.
Part of the reason Cool Cal was so popular is because he didn't want to get involved in people's business.
Yes, but that is what the president is for. We're supposed to run a country, not just lay back all day.
Creating the Roaring 20s. The next president was Herbert Hoover, and he was an engineer, and different from Cool Cal because he wanted to try and engineer everyone's business, which led to the Great Depression. FDR became the 32nd president and had to use a wheelchair to get around. He was the president when World War II broke out and oversaw the fight against the world's greatest evils in Germany. Harry Truman.
He never said any. He showed that man. And he also didn't talk about the achievement that he had of being in office for 12 years, the most out of any president.
Was next, and he worked with Oppenheimer to drop the atom bomb for the first time ever.
He was the only one to work with Oppenheimer because Teddy Roosevelt worked with him before Roosevelt died in office.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
He was also the first president of the Cold War to fight against.
Yes, he was. The Cold War was a big issue.
Communism, which ran against the values of freedom and democracy that the United States had, and the Soviets even built the Berlin Wall to keep people from escaping communism. Dwight Eisenhower became the 34th president after being a 5-star general in the army during World War II and commanded the storming of Normandy Beach, one of the biggest battles in warfare ever.
Yes, but the thing is, this wasn't during his presidency. This was during World War II. Also, this was during D-Day, which was the attack on the beaches of Normandy. And at this moment, Germany was still under him.
Next was John F. Kennedy, who ran against a man named Richard Nixon and won. He dropped the line,
"Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country."
He was very popular in the
He was very popular.
youngest president ever elected. And on
Yes, he was.
November 23rd, 1963, when he was in the back of a car, Lee Harvey Oswald, a professional sharpshooter, shot him in the head. When he was killed, Lyndon B. Johnson became president and continued to fight the Cold War.
Honestly, I like that detail of putting him in a plane because that's how he was sworn in, on a plane.
And he was responsible for deploying a lot more people to Vietnam.
Nixon's back!
And this time he was president when the first
Like that he doesn't mention. Here, I'll go back. He doesn't mention at all about MLK and the March on Washington.
Nixon's back!
And this time he was president when the first men were sent to the moon. And while Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Mike Collins were on the moon, President Nixon called him up on the phone.
I'm talking to you by telephone from the Oval Room at the White House.
Apparently you could just do that back in the 60s. Later it turns out he had to cover up some not great stuff and left his vice president in charge. And this is Gerald Ford.
Yes, that is true. The Watergate scandal was very bad.
He was a
and
college
I'm not gonna get into it.
football player, and his favorite movie was also apparently Home Alone.
Well, he wasn't president while Home Alone came out. He did play football though.
Jimmy Carter was next, and he recently became the first ever president to turn 100 years old, alive
True.
almost 50 years after he was president. And he kind of made everything expensive and wasn't super popular.
Wasn't super popular. He was one of our most famous presidents. Also, he didn't make everything more expensive. The economy did. The president doesn't run the economy of the world.
Reagan won a fairly large victory against him as the 40th president, and he was the president who really brought an end to the Cold War. And
Well, he didn't bring an end to it. He was helpful for the end of it because it was ended by
called the
the
Soviets
next
to
president.
Tear down this wall.
He didn't tell the Soviets that. That was Germany.
This is George Bush 1, and he became the
Yes, that is George Bush 1, or as he's known, George Sr.
41st president, and lost after one term to Bill Clinton, who was the
I like how he doesn't mention anything about him ending the Cold War or any of his other stuff that he did in the early 90s.
jazziest president.
And he even got jazzy in the bed.
George Bush's son, George Bush, was next, and he had a couple of shoes thrown at him.
And he also identified the size of this, which is pretty cool. A little tidbit.
He also saw America through some of its darkest days, from a terrorist attack on September 11th, 2000.
Don't remind me. Oof. Yeah. Just gonna give that a cross off for 9/11.
2001.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
Obama became the 44th president and ordered SEAL Team 6 to take out the terrorists who did the attack.
I am going to give them 2 points for culture insensitivity because that is racist. They were Middle Eastern. That's an Aladdin hat. It's racist.
And Donald Trump became the 45th president after building giant skyscrapers, being a famous TV.
Why does he have so
And Donald
much
Trump
Trump Lego stuff?
became the 45th president after building giant skyscrapers, being a famous TV celebrity.
You're fired.
And he was also in Home Alone.
Excuse me, where's the lobby?
Down the hall and to the left.
He came in promising to build a wall like this one. That's the hugest wall I've ever seen in my whole life. It's amazing. And he was the third ever president to get shot in the head.
Yes, actually true. But that was after he was president. And he was shot during
And the only one to survive, making for one of the coolest photos ever.
Biden's
He also put a big
terms.
red button on his desk to scare his enemies. And as of recording this video, Joe Biden is the 46th and current president, and he really likes chocolate chip ice cream. But after a series of stumbles, tumbles, and mumbles,
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to
and these three presidents all really should probably play Minecraft. I'm gonna build a wall with Joe. Joe, that's a calculator and not Minecraft. Hey, come on, man, I'm just trying to play Minecraft. Which brings us to today, where Trump or Kamala could be president.
Okay, so we're just gonna stop this here. We have 52 as our final total. We're gonna end it off here. mostly because I can tell which side of the politics he's on. And yeah, you can subscribe to my channel, subscribe to Allergy Gaming, which is my second channel, and you can follow me on Instagram at AnimationAllergy, or on Pixilart at AnimationAllergy, without an L in allergy. And ciao.